constitutional lawyer and the Vice President of the MDC Alliance.
Thank you very much for your time, Honorable Biti. Our first question today is, the world is currently going through one of the most challenging periods due to COVID-19 or coronavirus. What is likely to be the net effect of this pandemic on the Zimbabwean economy?
Well, the Zimbabwean economy was already in a recession. Output was low. Growth rate was already predicted by some to be as low as minus 13%. So the pandemic is going to have a serious effect on the remaining sectors that were still alive, in particular the mining sector and of course the agricultural sector. But the COVID can't be an excuse for the failure that was already there. This economy was collapsing, was on its knees as a result of the policy missteps and the self-induced policy distortions by Mutuli Ngube. One of them being, the failure of the government to live within its means, the serious budget deficits spared by money printing activities of the central bank. The second one being the total mismanagement of monetary policy and the foreign exchange regime in this country. It was a mistake to de-dollarize when we didn't have conditions for de-dollarization. So the economy was already in a tailspin without COVID-19. With COVID-19, we are in the sewer. COVID-19 is in this country.
Yeah. Do you think the Zimbabwean government, is it doing enough? Is it serious when it comes to fighting this pandemic, especially in Zimbabwe?
No, it's not. It's a joke. COVID has exposed the lack of leadership, the lack of talent, the lack of care on the part of the men and women currently masquerading as a government in the present day moment in Zimbabwe. The first thing that is so key in flattening the curve is to conduct tests. So the government needs to conduct tests. It's regrettable that to date less than 400 tests have been conducted. Every other serious country has rolled out programs of mass testing. South Africa, countries like Spain, China itself, the United States of America. I saw from last night that they are on 2 million tests. We've conducted less than 400 tests in a population of 14 million people. The second thing you need to do is you need to isolate and track and carry out surveillance. That we are also not doing. Number 3, we need to provide safety nets to people, particularly in a situation such as the current lockdown. 95% of our people are in the informal sector. They are unemployed. So it's impossible to implement a lockdown when you don't have safety nets. Safety nets in the form of cash handouts, safety nets in the form of food. People right now are busy queuing for roller meal. So when you have got poverty and economic dislocation, it's impossible to enforce a lockdown. Number 3, we need PPEs, personal protective equipment for our hospital staff. In some countries, as much as 10% of infections, they are affecting, health workers. So we need to protect the men and women, the brave men and women that are fighting this disease in the country. And in the case of Zimbabwe, I want to thank particularly Dr. Prosper Kufa-Akutani Jones, the director of the Medical Health Service for the city of Harare, and his team that includes people like Dr. Masunda for the fantastic work that they are doing, but they need personal protective equipment. Number 4, it's very important to have to as many isolation centers as possible. At the present moment, we literally have got one isolation center, which is Wilkins Hospital. Wilkins has got a mere 50 beds. Up until recently, it didn't have an ICU. Now at least they've got 2 to 4 ventilators, thanks to donors. So we need an isolation center in Harare, in Bulawayo, in Gweru, in Marsh Central Bindura, Marsh West Chinoi, Mutare, Manicaland, Mashingo, Chereds Bait Bridge, and of course Murewa, either in Marondera or Murewa or Mutoko. We don't have sufficient, isolation centers. But those isolation centers must have equipment, particularly respiratory equipment. In particular, the ventilators. We also need drugs and so forth. We don't have this. Government needs to put resources in this program. They failed to put, resources. Other countries are pouring billions of money, millions of dollars, and I would submit that the budget has got capacity of at least US $500 million. So Mtuli Ngube should have put at least $500 million US to combat this disease. This $500 million should also have gone to companies that are employing people, families that are starving, businesses that are being affected. So the response of the regime has been a total disaster, a complete disaster, and it has exposed Emerson for what he is, a pretender to the crown. He is not the leader of this country.
Yeah, at one point, Professor Mtuli was quoted on international media saying that the country was ready to fight COVID-19, and also at one point the Minister of Health was quoted saying that they wanted to make donations to China to help them fighting coronavirus. But now we are in this predicament. What's your take on such utterances?
The tragedy of Zimbabwe is that we are run by clueless, talentless, indifferent people whose biggest talent is to lie. And Mutuli is such a pathological liar who lies even when there is no reason to lie. The biggest indictment of Zanu-PF is that for the last 40 years, they failed to invest in public health delivery system that is of world-class standards. So since independence, there's been no new central hospital that has been built. The 4 major hospitals in the country, Mupiro, Parenyatwa, Harare Hospital, and UPS, were built before independence. So in 40 years, the regime has not built hospitals. The regime has not invested in public health system. And these leaders, these African elites, these Zanu-PF elites, have been, each time that they are sick, they go to Singapore, they go to Hong Kong, they go to South Africa, and COVID has exposed them now. We don't have an isolation center. Wilkins says. So the biggest challenge that ZANU has had is that it has not invested in public health delivery system, and COVID has caught them out now because there's no way to run. There's no way to run. Look at Boris Johnson right now. Is in a national health NHS facility, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital in London, because that government over the years, whether it has been the Tories in power or the Labour government, they've invested in a world-class national health system. Zanu-PF has failed to do that, and the population is paying a price for that.
You spoke about Prime Minister Boris Johnson being in NHS hospital. But here in Zimbabwe, last week we read reports that there was an isolation center which was being built in Mount Pleasant, especially for those who were strong, with strong political muscles. What's your take about that one? Having an elitist hospital at the expense of the ordinary people.
Yeah, firstly, I would like to wish Prime Minister Boris Johnson recovery. President Chamisa, David Coltart, and myself had a meeting with him when he was still Foreign Secretary on the 9th of May 2018. So we wish him a speedy recovery, as we do anyone and everyone in the world affected by this horrible virus. including our friend Zwelimanzi Vavi in South Africa. Coming now to your specific question, it is a tragedy that anything that is done by Zanu-PF, they have to look for the bottom line. They have to see how they can make money. And it's so tragic that even in the midst of the biggest pandemic that has affected the globe, they are still seeking to make money through cartels. Secunda Republic. Secunda has taken over everything in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabweans are not suffering from state capture, but from Secunda Republic. So it's therefore regrettable that Emerson and the so-called Minister of Health, Mr. Obadiah Moyo, have given this facility in Mount Pleasant to Secunda Republic. But I want to thank a group of Zimbabweans led by Nigel Chanakira, who has shown that you can do things without Secunda Republic by reviving St. Anne's Hospital. And I'm being told that it's now an isolation center that will provide services for free. That is commendable. I also want to commend Strive Masiwa and his wife for donating 45 ventilation machines in Zimbabwe. Why I'm mentioning Nigel Chanakira, why I'm mentioning Strive Masiwa and Mrs. Masiwa is that it is possible to get Zimbabwe moving without patronage, without cartels, without Secunda Republic. But the involvement of private citizens such as Strive Masiwa, Mrs. Masiwa and Nigel Chanakira and his team should not take away the primary responsibility of the state, of the regime, of providing full access to public health, proper medical facilities, the right to education, the right to health, the right to a clean environment. And we've got resources that can, what's 500 million US dollars to a country like Zimbabwe. So my point basically is that philanthropists should not come into the scene to take away, to mitigate the obligation and the responsibility of the regime to look after its people. Which is why I'm so much against Mr. Mnangagwa's humanitarian appeal of 2.2 billion US dollars, which he launched last Wednesday. Because he is surrendering responsibility to the international donor community. And it's very unfair because we know that 6 billion US dollars have been stolen through command agriculture and cartels, which money could have gone to health, to education, and to the humanitarian crisis. Last year, an appeal was made of US $294 million in respect of Cyclone Idai in Manicaland. But if you go there now, Chipinge is a disaster. Not a single cent of that US $295 million went to Cyclone. Where did the money go to? So the bottom line is that the state has got a duty to care. They've got a duty to uphold life. They've got a positive obligation to ensure that the right to life, the right to dignity, the right to health, the right to water, the right to education, and all other socio-economic rights provided for in the Constitution of Zimbabwe are actualized. And this requires resources.
You also spoke about hands-out, but I wanted to, can you go deep on this thing? What kind of intervention can the government of Zimbabwe do in place to cushion the ordinary citizens who are at home, the business people who are not operating at the moment?
The government of Zimbabwe must provide safety nets to vulnerable communities in Zimbabwe, to the working people in Zimbabwe. And I submit that they've got capacity of giving at least US $50 to every vulnerable community in Zimbabwe right now. Think of our fathers and mothers who are in the rural areas. Think of our compatriots that are in Epworth, in Harare South, in Cowdrey Park, in Dubuladzimo, in Devonshire, in Sakuva, Mutare. So they have an obligation to provide these safety nets, and they must do so right now. They've got an obligation to look after small, medium-scale companies that have been hard hit by this coronavirus. There are small little businesses, little groceries shops that are closed, that you find at Juru Growth Point, that you find at Mshagashe, Growth Point, that you find at Dotito in Chendampuya, in Nkai, in Jolocho, that need to survive. They've been affected by the disease. So the government needs a serious stimulus package. And ironically, I can assure you that if the government were to put in my submission $500 million, it will actually help them in persuading the international community to also match them dollar for dollar. As I'm talking to you right now, the IMF has set aside $50 billion for this crisis. The World Bank has set aside $12 billion for this crisis. The African Development Bank has set aside huge amounts of money. It's better, it's more attractive for those IFIs to come to Zimbabwe's help if Zimbabwe is doing something on its own. But on the contrary, you've got a regime that is so insensitive. Mr. Mnangagwa has been hiring jets from Dubai to take him to Namibia at the cost of $4 million or thereabouts. That can buy you 10 vending machines. That Wilkins Hospital does not have more than 4 ventilator machines is an indictment. That we've got less than 8 functioning ventilation machines in Zimbabwe is an indictment on this regime. So to answer you, the government can be doing a lot, but it's failing to do so. It has been caught with its pants down.
Maybe as the chairperson of PAC, maybe you know better than us. Maybe the world might want to know. Do we have the money as the country to caution? Do we have the money?
Yes, we do have the resources. The issue about Zimbabwe has never been about money. The issue about Zimbabwe has always been about the mismanagement of that money. As I'm talking to you right now, the 2020 budget is a $64 billion budget. And if you look at the budget statement, they are going to collect at least $58 billion. Their budget deficit projected is less than 3%. Only last week on Sunday, they passed and enacted SI 87 of 2020, which they increased fuel levies by 100%. That's another additional source of revenue. So the bottom line is we have got resources. Last year's export earnings were in excess of $5 billion. $5 billion. So the problem is the mismanagement of the money. This government can afford a $500 million as fiscal stimuli for COVID-19. Mutulisi Mube must do that. Emerson Mnangagwa must do that. Obadiah Moyo must do that.
Okay, Mr. VP, the doctors have been on strike for more than 200 days, and now we are in this COVID disaster. Where are we going as a country?
We're going nowhere, and very fast. It's a crime that you pay medical doctors effectively less than $85 a month. It's just a crime. It's just a crime. Now this disease is exposed to Emerson and to everyone else how important health workers are, from a doctor to the office orderly who cleans Parere Nyatwa Hospital, who cleans Nazareth infectious disease unit, who cleans Mupido Hospital. These people are so important, and we need to reward them. During the government of national unity, we paid doctors through the Global Fund, but this regime has burned those bridges. we accuse them of sanctions. We call them fascist. Only 3 weeks ago, the esteemed minister of defense was saying COVID was a disease to punish white people. But the next morning, you are putting an appeal of $2.2 billion to those same white people. They'll just laugh at you. So we've got an irresponsible, incorrigible, incompetent, indifferent, clueless regime in the form of Emerson Mnangagwa. And I always say constantly, this is the worst government in the history of governments.
Yeah, you spoke about Minister Opam Chinguru saying that coronavirus was a punishment from God, but she also sits in the task force. How serious is that task force on COVID-19? I mean, we have people who say such utterances.
It's ridiculous. It's mad. It's total madness, undiluted insanity. And if you look at that task force, countries all over the world have set up these task forces. But these task forces must have specialists, virologists, specialized doctors. We don't have a single doctor who sits in that committee. Yet we've got some of the finest health professionals in the world. People like Dr. Trusty Zaranika. We were talking about Prosper Chonzi a few minutes ago. So it's just a joke, which is typical everything that this government does.
So in short, you're saying that this task force is the jobs for boys and girls.
Look, if you how do blind people lead the blind? What does Kembo Mohadi know about these diseases? So why not have a task force run by medical health professionals? Put Zaranika there, put Chonzi there, put the many doctors that are so competent. Put Dr. Stole there, put Dr. Chigwedere there. There's so many doctors in this country. Let them run this disease. That's why we can't flatten a cave. We don't know. We only have done 400 tests. How do you fight if you're not testing? What is the point of this lockdown if you're not testing? It's a joke. It's a waste of time.
Indeed. Lastly, the government has allowed Mbaramsika and Lusaka and Sakuba to be opened, but we're still in a lockdown. How are we going to... They're talking about social distancing, but when we're viewing videos and pictures from those markets, there is no social distancing at all.
Yeah, the solution was not to reopen Mbaramsika, Sakuva market. The solution was to give our compatriots who run businesses from Mbaramsika money, US dollars, so that they sit at home. That's why I spoke of safety markets. Those people earn 2,000, 4,000, 5,000 pounds per week. That's less than 50 US dollars. So give our compatriots in Mbaramsika 50, 60 US dollars so that they don't go and expose themselves to this terrible disease when we only have one hospital with 50 bed units. This is what I mean by total incompetence. This is what I mean by cluelessness. Cluelessness from Mr. Mnangagwa and DJ Biscuit, also known as Obadiah Moyo.
Thank you very much, Honorable Biti.